You'll say, my God, how did he survive all that? I had gotten introduced to smugglers. At one point, I was flying Lear jets full of money to the Cayman Islands for smuggling, one of the biggest smuggling organizations in the world. They put me in jail, called me out of my cell. They hand me my indictment papers, and he goes, you're looking at 55 years, kid. If you want to change your life and never go back to crime and not be a drug dealer, you got to change your life. Do you or do you not want to get out of trouble? Are you willing to work for the DEA? Yes or no? I go, yes.
I'd like to welcome Ken Bear, author of One Step Over the Line. And today, after you hear his incredible testimony, be sure to check out our special and limited time offer announcement just for you. So welcome. Oh my gosh, good to meet you. Finally. I feel like I've been talking to like a pen pal about your story, and I've been really looking forward to meeting you personally. Your story is super rad, and there is so much to share. So I'm really happy that you're here today on the channel.
Well, thanks for having me. And because we've talked so much, I feel like I should reach over and hand you a cup of coffee, and we're sitting in a coffee shop somewhere.
Virtual coffee meet.
Yeah.
I was curious. You said you had surgery. What happened? Are you okay?
I've had surgery. I've had over a dozen surgeries. This is my third shoulder surgery. I've had 2 open heart surgeries. I have a pacemaker. I have several other procedures. I like to say I've been knocked out so many times I should have my own hospital gown with my name and blood type on it. So you and I were talking, and I had this thought. What's more resilient? What's stronger? The human psyche, the human mind, the human heart, or the human body? And in my book, I talk about it a little bit about how we bury certain, like if you hear my story, at the end of it all, you'll go, as we all have stories. We all have our shtick, as we say. But you'll say, my God, how did he survive all that? And I think part of the human survival trick is to bury our pain. At the end of my book, I say, we all have skeletons in our closet. Where are yours buried? And so what I mean is, and because you and I have had a little bit of this conversation, do we protect our soul? Do we protect our psyche by burying all our old pains in little shallow graves covered by little scabs? And the ones on our bodies, we can't hide as much. I take my shirt off and there's a chest scar from 2 open heart surgeries, a pacemaker that looks like a pack of Marlboros under a t-shirt. You can almost see it, right? And scars from all the surgeries and whatnot. So there's the question of the day, right? What's more resilient? And are we able to hide our scars internally a lot easier than we are externally, obviously? But the problem is, again, the scars on the outside of our body heal to where they're just a distant memory, and when we bury our pain inside us, a lot of times it'll come back in full force, right? Like my loss of my father at 13. Every now and then, and I'm 67, I'll break out hysterically crying. My wife will see me go into what feels like an eternity of uncontrollable sobbing. And, maybe I'll see a Father's Day card, or a movie where somebody, something will set it off. And so with that, thank you for having me on your show. And that might be the question at the end of the day.
Were you and your father close?
Yeah. Well, as close as I could be. I was 13. He worked 2 jobs. He worked in New York City. We lived in Wayne, New Jersey in 1960s. I call it the Norman Rockwell. We had a little farm. We lived on a corner of my grandfather's farm. The school was built right behind our house, so we would jump the fence, go to school, and then go out at lunch. We could literally walk out the front of the school, jump a couple cow pens, and end up in my grandmother's living room. They'd call us over the loudspeaker, well, one of the little bear boys come and get your dog. It's in our office. So imagine that Norman Rockwell upbringing. But my dad did work in the city, driving to New York 5 days a week. He had a store. He worked on Saturday. He worked a couple nights a week at the store, and he took several business trips a year. So, it was the norm, right? He was first generation. He'd come from Germany and our family were on the run from the Nazis. So, we got to America, the work ethic of make it.
So you guys immigrated over here is what you're saying?
I did. My mother and father my grandparents came from Germany with my father and my mother separately. They met in New York City, and fell in love and had similar backgrounds. They got married and they built a house on the corner of my grandfather's farm in New Jersey. I grew up on old Westerns, and the simple life. Yeah.
Something that you absolutely don't see anymore.
No.
The way that you're talking about how you would just jump the fence and then the school would call you and say that your dog was there and that, it's just so different. And one of the things that really intrigued me about your story is the fact that when we first spoke, you immediately let me know that you have dyslexia.
Yeah.
And I thought, crime, dyslexia? I never thought that the two would pair until I started doing some research on what that meant. I wanted to know if you could talk to me about your childhood and where dyslexia played a huge role and continues to play a huge role in your life.
My current wife, who I've been with about 10 years, is an expert in early child development. I always say she's an expert in early child development on her life's work.
Yeah.
When I met her, I thought my initials were KSB. Then I found out the initials were PTSD, OCD. I had some other little initials to add to my name. 20 to 25% of the general population has some form of dyslexia. 50% of the prison population has dyslexia. ADHD runs about the same numbers, slightly different, but about that. I failed first grade. And at the time, nobody knew what dyslexia was, or even that I had it. And I remembered when I started writing the book, I got kicked out of the Cub Scouts for beating up the den mother's son. And it's funny because on my website, which is onestepovertheline.com, not a plug, but just so you can see there's pictures and whatever, there's a picture of me wearing this Cub Scout uniform the day before I went to my first Cub Scout meeting, which was at the den mother's house. It was for her son.
Oh,
and
my
I
gosh.
remembered 50 years later, let's say 60 years later, in writing the book, I remembered why he made fun of me for failing first grade. And normally I was pretty thick-skinned, but all the kids were around. I was, and he kind of kept going, and I just beat him up in his living room. And then, of course, my mother tried to get the den mother to accept me back in the Cub Scouts, and she wasn't having me.
Wasn't having it. Yeah.
If you look at the website, you'll see the little kid standing there in the living room with the little uniform. The only thing I ever got to keep was the pocket knife, I think, is what I cared about, but, and that goes beyond that. I mean, go back 18 years later, I've already failed first grade. I'm behind in high school. I have terrible grades in high school. I mean, I can learn. I'm very intelligent. I can learn history, but I failed Algebra 1 all the way through high school and a little bit of college. I never really passed high school. They kind of gave me that a boy. That's another story. My mother, finally, someone said to her, your son could have dyslexia. So we get in the car, we go to this specialist, and we're right in the middle of the conversation with the doctor. And my mother was a great woman, a wonderful woman. The doctor says, your son absolutely has dyslexia. She looks at the doctor, says, well, he's 18, too late now, gets up and walks out of the doctor's office, which is inside a university. We went to Nova University, she's a specialist in learning. And me and the doctor just look and raise our hands. And she literally was down the hall and yells, "You coming?" Because I think she couldn't, as a parent, realize that she had missed this ball for 18 years. I was already selling drugs. I started selling drugs at 13 or 14. One of the things that happened was in 1969, my family moved from New Jersey to New Orleans, where part of my family owned a business and my dad was actually working for it. So he was transferred to New Orleans. So how did I get involved in drugs, leaving that farm life, milk the cows, to 1969, the deep south of New Orleans, Sodom and Gomorrah. At that exact same time, my grandfather died, who I was really close with. I spent every day on the farm with my grandfather.
What was your age when you lost your grandfather?
12.
And then your father died
When I was
months later
13.
when you were 13.
My dad died actually yesterday, was the anniversary of his death, and he died in 1970.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I lost my dad too, to like different circumstances, but he died on Christmas Eve. So around the holidays, I'm like, I get the blues, and I miss him. And I know what you're saying when it comes to the little signs, like you'll see a card or you'll hear a song, or maybe you like see a boat and you're like, my dad loved boats, and it just comes out and you don't even expect it. Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss.
Oh, yours too. I always say if my mother lived to like 91, I mean, God, that's a good run, but he didn't die at 48. That's not fair. How old was your dad?
He was in his 60s, but I'm an adopted child. So for me, we weren't very close when I was growing up. And he seemed really bossy and tired. You know, you take on so many foster kids, you finally adopt, and then you're tired. You know, he was in his late 40s, 50s. He was in construction. And then it was like the last 5 years that we got super close, but it was after I broke free of a domestic violence relationship. And he was like the one person that came in my life and reminded me that the Lord is good. And we would go to lunch and he would just take the time to let me know I was still worthy and loved after that experience. And he was one of the only people that didn't say, I told you so. Yeah, he was really loving through the whole process. So that trust got built and then it became really unexpected. So
ripped away.
Yeah, it was ripped away. That's how it felt. I think that's the hardest part of losing someone is when it's unexpected or ripped away. It seems really unfair and there's no closure to that. This wasn't fair feeling really. It just sneaks up on you, you know?
As a kid growing up, I used to try to convince myself that my dad was actually a secret agent. He was on a mission. Even though I saw him rolled out on the gurney, he was still alive, but the paramedics had got him out of the house. You know, you try to protect you. Like I said, the human psyche tries to protect itself.
Well, you lost two people really close to you when you were that young. 12 years old is really young to lose two leaders in your life. I wondered, how did that affect you socially? You were already socially not accepted with dyslexia when you were younger. So, you know.
Well, I mean, I had friends. They just, well, I'll give you, just going back to dyslexia. I remember, you know, I failed first grade. I remember there would be a time like, you know, like the teacher, like the third day of the first day of school, like, you know, the first new year, back when I was a little kid, I was waiting sooner. Eventually, I remember one time, I know it's going to happen. And the teacher goes, Kenny, why don't you go sit with Johnny back in the round table in the back, right? The short bus. And I remember getting up going, and I knew it was coming. And I'm going, no, he's an idiot. No, I'm smart. I mean, maybe I was 6, you know, or 8, but I know, no, Johnny, no, Kenny's smart. So fast forward, I had made some friends while my father was alive, and it was really good. My parents decided to send me to private school. My older brother's, by the way, is a genius. My older brother's a double Ivy League graduate. So you're following in the footsteps of a guy that you can't, there's no way, you know. So like, I remember thinking, well, if he's going to be the smart one, I'll be the funny one. You know, I guess people laugh at my jokes, so I'll be the funny one. But so you compensate, right? And the summer after my dad died, I had no friends. I mean, I just was in New Orleans and I had friends, but they were either, you know, away at camp. I don't think they could fully connect with the death, like how, you know, of my pain. So when you're 13 and 12, maybe you go find other guys to play with that they knew better. So I had that whole summer I was alone. I remember I'd get up, I'd take a shower, get dressed, put on a little button-down shirt, my jeans, and just walk around the neighborhood by myself. And I did that for months, every day. So when I got back to school, I got offered to smoke some weed. And so I said, okay, my dad had already passed. I didn't have guidance, but I didn't have a father. And I did try marijuana. The next drug I did was a 4-way hit of Orange Sunshine, which is LSD, acid. And, you know, it's an 8-hour trip kind of thing. So, I mean, not that marijuana is a gateway drug, but there was certainly that time. And by the way, I didn't do acid too much more after that. I was like, oh, I don't like that feeling.
It wasn't a good feeling.
I don't like to be out of control, you know, like.
That's really funny you say that, because you were saying that dyslexia and ADHD they have like common percentages, right? And as somebody that has ADHD, I've never been somebody that wants to be under the influence of anything where I don't have self-control either. I just really appreciate you calling that out.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I've been plenty drugged up, but I like to, even when I do my own thing, I like to know that there's an end in sight, like how to control it. Even with the surgery, if the prescription called for 1 pain pill, I take a half. My wife knows me as somebody that never likes to be out of control. Like if we go out, I don't really drink anymore. I used to, but I don't really anymore. But she's always says, I always know you're in charge.
I was going to say, I think we all have to like experience sometime in our life. We decide we're just going to go fully in and try something, or we've drank too much or whatever. And then it's the trip or the excessive amount of alcohol where you're like praying, like, God, if you just let me live through this experience, I promise I'll go to church on Sunday and I'll stop drinking and I'll quit hanging out with Johnny. And like, you know, I remember my experience was when I drank a chocolate martini and I mixed it with the wrong alcohols at 21 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. It felt really good. I was like, oh, this is what people are talking about when they're drunk. Oh, I was a hot mess. I literally prayed. I was like, God, if you just spare my life, I will serve you. Like I was totally in the prayer mode. And then like 3 days later, I was like, whew, almost lost my cool there. You know, like pretend that never happened. Would you say that trip that you experienced was the learning experience where you're like, I'm never losing control? I know. No,
I just think I've always been a leader and somebody that like likes to be in charge. Even as a little kid, I used to always kind of be but I believe me, I've been on I've done a lot of drugs. I did have a bad run with cocaine for a long period of time, but not because I think I was addicted to it. Everybody around me was doing it in South Florida. It was the drug of the time. But I've also been the person where everybody's getting high, partying, and I just take the plate and go, it's 2 a.m, I'm going to bed. Blow it off the plate and say, everybody see you later, let yourselves out. And they're like, well, no, I'm done. I'm going to bed. I got to go to work tomorrow. I got money to make, or I got a life to live. But having said that, I don't know. It's been a long ride. You know, there's been a couple of times when maybe I made that prayer, let me live or let me get through this and I'll never do this again.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it's funny. There's an old Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise movie that me and my little brother always joke about where he's trying to kill himself. It's called The End. Finally, he goes in the ocean and he swims out to the deep of the ocean and he realizes he's going to die. And he looks up to God and he says, God, let me live and I'll give you everything. I'll give you everything. I'll donate myself to you. I'll give you everything I own. And as he gets closer to shore, he starts renegotiating. Like, did I say everything? I meant 30%. Did I mean, and when he gets to the beach, he goes, I'll give you 10%. Yeah, you do kind of make some false promises.
In my defense, I've never actually touched another chocolate martini. And so in selling drugs in Florida, what was the draw to that?
So I think, the thing is, when my mother moved us from New Orleans to South Florida in 1973,
right,
to get away from drugs in the city, supposedly. But that's like the exact landing point for the drug epidemic. And South Florida is the closest geographically to South America. One of the things, I was doing drugs in New Orleans, but they were more like smoking a little weed, doing a little of this. When I moved to South Florida, I landed in the epicenter, the gold rush, if you will, and it just exploded under my feet. And we were new to town. I went from a high school of 270 kids to 2,200 kids, and drugs were everywhere. Everybody was buying and selling marijuana. Marijuana was better than it was in New Orleans. I just got involved in it. I say my little brother and I, we started a little business out of my mom's house selling little, grams, little bags of weed, little pieces of coke, selling Quaaludes were a big thing back then.
What's a Quaalude?
A Quaalude was a sedative. It used to be called a Quaalude or a lemon. Or funny, they were called 714s, and our phone number was 962-0714. Not that we ordered it, but it was coincidental.
Yeah.
And you would do them and have sex. A lot of the kids would, they were very, they were really powerful. I didn't really do it. Again, I wouldn't do them. I would maybe do a half a Quaalude. Why? Because Kenny doesn't like to be out of control.
Right.
Everybody was doing Quaaludes, wrecking their cars, stumbling around town. Not me. I would rarely do a Quaalude because I didn't like, if I did, maybe I'd do a half. We got into that. And what happened was, back then, there was a thing called juvie. So we're all selling drugs in high school to each other to get enough to get high, to make a couple extra bucks. I still had jobs. My brother had jobs. I worked at a hotel. I worked as a pizza delivery guy. I worked as a cab driver. My brother worked as a dishwasher. We were just selling some drugs. It was cool. And I think everybody figured when you turn 18, you're going to go to college and give up this stuff, because back then they have a thing called juvie. So if you were under 18, you'd go to juvie court and you might go to sheriff's boys ranch, or have to go away for a couple months to like a juvie hall, but you weren't going to jail. And after 18, you were an adult, you could end up in a really bad prison. So most people went on at 18 to get jobs, go to college. And that's why I realized so how the name of the book came around was One Step Over the Line. In my mid-20s, I remember thinking to myself, how did I get into all of this? My big mistake was not taking 2 steps back. I never disobeyed anybody. I wasn't a bad kid. I skipped school one time while my father was still alive. He gave me such a guilt trip about, just letting him down, that I never did it again, even after he passed. So it wasn't rebellious. It was just the lexicon of that time, the language of that time. Most of the people I knew were selling drugs, buying drugs, partying. And I just kept going instead of quitting and going to college. I even went to college, strangely, because I should have never been there, because I didn't graduate high school, really. But I only made it about 6 months, and I went back to selling drugs because I had also, at the same time as building my own little drug, trying harder to build a bigger profit, bigger business. I had gotten introduced to smugglers and, that were older than me. And I ended up, at one point, I was flying Lear jets full of money to the Cayman Islands for smuggling, one of the biggest smuggling organizations in the world. I was 18 or 19 years old. They'd give me and my girlfriend, a Lear jet and a suitcase with $1.5 million, $2 million. And I would fly down to the Caymans. Age. I say, if my dad taught me how right good was, this guy, Sandy Perkoff, taught me how good bad could be, if I can get that right. And he was an ex-con man and had done some time, and he was a yacht broker. And I met him, and he liked me, and he was living in New Orleans. I met him through my New Orleans friends, and he would come to South Florida to sell boats. He ended up selling boats to smugglers and planes. And, I was the one that would sign the titles. I would forge the titles. And I became pretty good at forging, not forging checks, but signing the back of the titles and learning how to do all that. I would copy the name. I just had a talent for it. He took me to the Caymans and showed me how to do the run. He wanted me to do the runs because I was a kid. What would they do, right? So we did a few of those. And at the same time, I had a friend of mine, Terry, who was selling pot with me in high school. In 1978, he went back to Ohio, where he was from. And one day he called me up, and I was selling weed, and he goes, "Hey, Kenny," he was working at the Ford plant. He goes, "I think I can sell some pot up here." I go, "Okay, well, come down and get some. I'll give you a couple pounds." So he jumps in his car.
19-hour drive.
Yeah, 19 hours.
I remember I was stopped in my tracks when I was like, man, the things people did for drugs back then.
Yeah, well, we were kids. Jump in a car and go. So he drove down. I gave him the couple pounds. He drove back. I guess he had a 3-day weekend. It's 19 hours if you don't stop. And called me back a couple days later, a week later, goes, "Hey, I sold that. I think I can sell more." So I had gotten a bale of pot from Donnie Steinberg indirectly. I got it through one of our guys. And that bale's about the size of a suitcase. It's about 50 pounds. So pretty big, maybe 2 suitcases. And he drove back down. We shoved it in the back of his car. It wouldn't fit. So I tell the story. We're in the middle of the street trying to sub this burlap sack. Called me up. He goes, "I sold it." He quit the Ford factory immediately. A 12-year ongoing thing where we were running mostly pot. We did a little bit of coke, not much, mostly selling it. And we would run about 1,000 pounds at a time, sometimes more. Remember, getting pot isn't like going to your pot depot and picking up as much as you want. You have to wait for the smugglers to bring it in. You have to know the smuggler. You have to arrange. It has to be good enough for you to buy. And you have, so 1,000 pounds of weed back then was about $250,000. So that was one thing I had. I had a steady gig for 12 years running pot up to Ohio. I was at about 18 or 19. I got tied up in a strange cocaine bust in New Orleans that had nothing to do with me. It was one of my best friends. He had got in trouble. Sad story, very wealthy family, one of the wealthiest families in the world. And his father let him, figured this kid's a screw up. He was a child diabetic. He was shooting coke. He was a junkie. He was an addicted, troubled kid, but he was sick. He wasn't a criminal. He was never going to and his father decided to let him go to federal prison for like a year. The reason I tell the story is he implicated me. Why? Because I'm from Florida, so the cops want to know, who do you know? I had nothing to do with it. So I left the country and went to Jamaica. Sandy helped me go down to Jamaica for like 6-7 months and just dry out, hang out, wait for this thing to blow over. While I was in Jamaica, one of my friends came down with another friend of mine, and we ended up smuggling out a load of weed. My one friend had a plane and he had a landing strip. So at like 19, 20, I smuggled my first load of drugs, and that was 600 pounds of Jamaican marijuana out of Jamaica into Florida, which I shipped up to Ohio and sold to Terry. So that was my first smuggling trip.
You were so young, and this is a really big illegal operation that you're running at such a young age. And I was curious, what was going on with your surroundings at this time with the people that you loved the most? I know you said that your brother is kind of this elite, really genius, smart guy that was well on his way to do really big things. I wondered if he was in on it. And if he wasn't, how did he view you being in on it? Did he even know? How was your mother? I mean, she tried to move you away so you would get away from this, but you delved heavily into it, and then you had a girlfriend, I wondered if there was at any point in time that your girlfriend said, I'm really not for this, but I support you. I mean, how did it affect the people around you at the time?
Good question. My younger brother and I had, grown up together in this world. My older brother had left for college, and my older brother's where my younger brother's more like me, freewheeling, partying. And my younger brother got out at it, went to college at 18. He never kept selling drugs. But my older brother is very, like I said, double Ivy League graduate. Yeah. He's one of the top attorneys in the world right now in his field. He's a world-class photographer. He's a writer.
He's just really good at everything he does. He's that guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And he did not approve. He's very straight-laced, and he did not approve to the kind of point when he went to law school. I don't think you're supposed to after you grad, your first year of law school, you have a champagne. I don't think he had the champagne because he wasn't old enough to drink, so he wouldn't. He's very straight-laced, where I'm the complete opposite. And a good part of it would probably go back to our childhood of him being able to do certain things and me not. So, my mother knew all about it. One time she found 4 pounds of marijuana in high school in the house and flushed all 4 pounds down the toilet. So
you're like,
we said, we didn't know. We know, right? We came home and going, bye. She goes, you don't know how much work it was. We gotta go, why don't you just throw it away? Why don't you just go down to the dumpster and dump it somewhere? Why would you spend all day doing that? Yeah. And, well, it was she didn't know any better, I guess. And
I think she did the right thing. That's pretty funny. But when you're in the business, you just burned money.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, we were just, when we survived, I mean, it was like a lot of money. We actually said to her, listen, Mom, we're selling drugs out of the house every day while you're at work. And, it's a big house. There's a lot of bills. Why don't you let us give you a piece of the action? And she was having none of that, obviously. So it affected me in a couple different ways. My girlfriend knew I was doing it, because she was my girlfriend from high school and whatnot, or right after high school, that kind of thing. It was hard to meet girls. Like somebody asked me, well, did you date normally? No. Once I became the more I became a drug runner and a drug dealer and a smuggler, can't go to, like, I remember one time I went to the veterinarian with my dog, and she was cute, and she's a vet, and I'm leaving, and like the girl, the counter receptionist said, so-and-so, you ought to, she's kind of cute, she thinks you're cute, but I can't go out with a vet. I'm a drug dealer. So there was a lot of times when you couldn't date normal channels as I grew up, and my mother wasn't happy about it. My older brother put up with it. I got busted twice. My brother supported me through both of the arrests. But, thank God now I'm straight-laced, and, my brothers and, and I are connected. And my mother was so proud of me when I got my first job. I became successful at what I did. I was really determined when I got my first real job to be really good at it, to prove that I could still do it. I could do it legitimately. So, yeah, it was tough. One time I remember I was driving down this little 2-lane road. We had just brought in a load of weed, and I had like 1,400 pounds in my living room. And my friend Big Jeff, who was also the guy that smuggled the 600 pounds out of Jamaica with me, we had the weed in the living room. And I see a girl I know from high school hitchhiking. And we had dated in high school. I knew the family. So I picked her up and I brought her back to the house, the stash house. And he goes, "What are you doing? We have, almost 2,000 pounds of weed here." She goes, "Oh, you guys got a lot of weed." And I go, "She's cool." And she just hung out with us, I think maybe me and her went and smooched a little bit, but, here she is sitting on top of a bale, having a beer. So it was that prevalent. I'm sure deep inside, I felt like I wasn't part of society. I remember having this recurring dream. Now that you bring it up. And I remember I'd walk into a house and there would be an archway and I'd come through the front door. It's funny. I remember this now. I mean, you're bringing it back, and there'd be all these people dancing and talking like a cocktail party, all dressed nicely, and I couldn't touch them. I couldn't walk through the archway. I didn't fit in. I wasn't one of those people, and you know what I mean. I was an outsider. I was an outsider because I got kicked out of the Cub Scouts. I was an outsider because I failed first grade. I was an outsider because I sold drugs. I don't know.
Wow, that's really interesting. Is that like a trauma dream, do you think?
Yeah.
Deep-rooted reminder of how you really felt all your life?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I've had a few of those myself. I've called them trauma dreams. I know as a mother, one child has shared. She had some dreams very similar to that where she would be frozen or something would go on. And I'm like, that's a trauma dream. We need to deal with that, whatever's going on, because otherwise that's going to follow you into when you're an adult. So yeah, I understand that.
You're a good mom.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you got to take what you've learned from your life and you have to apply it. And just, I think the goal of being a parent is to try to do it better than what it was shown to you. Like that's always been my goal.
Throughout life, we always want our kids to have more than what the things that we didn't get, or at least what we got. So now you go into the world we live in today, 12 days away from an election, where 50% of the country is convinced the world's coming to an end, and the other 50% of the country is convinced the world's coming to an end. And they both have the same goals. 97%, 95% believe the same things. They want a good place for their kids to grow up. They want their kids to have a better income or as good a life as they have. The difference in the two sides politically is what they believe those things would be. But I don't believe anybody wants anything else than to leave the world in a better place than we found it. To give our kids what we had and more. Let's sit down and agree to that. It's just they're arguing about different roads or different paths to get there. Listen, Oprah Winfrey once said, "There's no bad people. There's just people that do bad things." And I'm here to tell Oprah different. I know from where I've come, there are really bad people that really hurt people, but most aren't. But I've been to prison or jail. I've been to the streets. I've had guns put to my head. I've had friends killed. I have a friend paralyzed for 40 years in a wheelchair that was robbed in a drug deal. I'm just saying there are bad people and there are good people that bad things happen to.
That sounds like combat to be in that line of work.
It is. Believe me, when you're smuggling drugs, it's like a military mission, and it really is. I mean, we did one smuggling trip where we brought 300 kilos in from Colombia to a runway in northern Florida, like a road to nowhere, not a real road, not a real runway, a road we made into a runway.
Right.
And I don't know why, it wasn't my thing, but my friends were doing it, and they offered me $20,000 for the night. Plus, I could make money working with the group and selling the product, investing in the trip. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And we were literally up for days on speed because of, you're moving for days as a military operation, moving the cars, moving the fuel, getting the plane down to Colombia. We had traded cocaine to a U.S. Army Ranger. And we had claymores, Laws rockets, machine guns, hand grenades. We were as armed as the elite military of America. Now, we didn't have, on that night, we had hand grenades and machine guns. I had a pistol. I had a Rambo knife. But we actually had a guy, Big Jeff, again, at the end of the road that we made into a runway with a fully automatic machine gun and hand grenades. His job was to stop any car coming down that road, whether it be two people out for a ride or the police. So thank God nobody showed up, because I don't know that any of us would want to kill somebody. We were up for days, so we were not thinking clearly, but everybody I was with was my friends from high school. Kids just like me in their 20s. We had one guy in charge. The guy was just another guy I went to high school with. He's actually worked for me many times, but when you do these missions, there's one guy in charge. And whether he's a knucklehead or he's brilliant, when it's decided that he's in charge, he's in charge.
That's how it is.
I'm laid up against a tree with a pistol and a knife waiting. I remember we're waiting for hours. We had radios hanging inside trees. And what we had was glow sticks, Callium sticks, they crack them and they like the green sticks on strings. And we had beacons and all these lights that would flash like when you go overboard. There's a special beacon that you can tie to a raft so that people can find you at night. So we had all those, and it was me and another guy's job they click the radio, click click, we all click click, click click click, click click click, click 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 click. Everybody's responding, click 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 click, all the team members. The voice comes over the radio, hang fire, hang fire. That was code for planes coming in. I remember my friend Nathan told us that he turned to the co-pilot and it was just a black swamp with a road in it. And all of a sudden, boom, he goes to the co-pilot, he goes, look, it's Miami International Airport and I know customs. Let's land this thing. And he landed and, we loaded up 300 kilos of coke. And I know it's crazy, but then we went back six weeks later or so to do it again. And Nathan didn't make that trip. He died. The plane never got off the ground in Colombia. There was too much, you have to rig extra fuel in. You have to rig all, you have to do it. There's so much weight between the extra fuel and the cocaine, 400 kilos is another 1,000 pounds, or you figure 700-800 pounds of cocaine, probably have another 1,000 pounds of fuel, plus the pilot and the co-pilot. The runways are short. They're not paved. They're dirt runways. Whatever happened, he didn't make it, and he hit the tree line and blew up a ball of flames. So
and you and Nathan were close.
We were close. We were all, at that time, we were hanging out, all of us, me, the whole crew. It was our crew.
And at some point, you ended up getting caught, and
Twice.
There's a big experience with a man named Jose.
So the first time I got busted was in 1988, and my friend Bob Silverbullet, he was also the guy that we smuggled the load out of Jamaica with back in the very beginning, and I'd done a lot of things with Bob, moving boats and this and that. He calls me up and he says, hey, a friend of ours, Bruce, had 40,000 pounds in Canada. And I said why would Bruce have 40,000 pounds in Canada? It sells, the more north you go, the more valuable it is. So in Canada, the pot's going to sell for more in Florida. Florida, everybody's got pot. You can't make any money selling it here. You had to take it out of state to really make, the spread in brokering it, so to speak. So, he said that Bruce couldn't sell it. He wanted us to smuggle it back into America. So we used a seaplane, and we put and a seaplane, you can't build a runway. You can't make a runway in the middle of the water, and you can't land at night because you can't see the water. There's no waves, anything. It's really, you can emergency land, but we couldn't do that. So we did about 6 trips, I don't know how many, 6, 7 trips, brought in about 1,400 pounds because the plane could only hold about 200 or 300 pounds, and it wouldn't sell. So I ended up moving it from Maine, where we had it stashed. We flew it from Canada into Maine. I was driving it in a U-Haul truck down to DC because Bob thought he could sell it, and I couldn't sell it to Terry or anybody that I knew. I had a couple other places that we got pulled over. It was a 4th of July weekend. The name of the chapter in the book is Why I Never Work on a Weekend, or a holiday, because I used to always say I'm not a weekend holiday, because I never wanted to work on my birthday or a major holiday and then have a problem and then
wreck your time. Mm-hmm.
Well, think about every Christmas you think about your father. Every 4th of July I think about going to jail. Now I don't do that anymore, but so I was in jail with this guy Jose, and the jail was built in the 1860s. It was horrible. They just got flushing toilets. You had to walk your feces and your urine in a bucket down to a cauldron, and it was so overcrowded that I had the top bunk. My nose was right next to the ceiling, and there was a rat hole right next to.
No.
I'm living in a nice house, driving jet skis every day, playing on my boats. I'm not living, this lifestyle. And so Jose...
You're saying you were pretty squished between...
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, yeah. It's like the ghetto of the ghetto.
It was so hot that summer, July. It was the hottest July basically since 1863 when they built the jail. Jose was in there for stabbing his pregnant wife 7 times in the stomach. And she lived and the baby lived. He had like 5 or 6 kids. I remember him. I always tell the story. He goes, when I get out of here, me and my family are going to be a family. We're going to be back together again. I remember thinking, gee, Jose, she's a really understanding woman. But, you're cellmates and we kind of got along. You're not like you can pick and choose who you're going to eat dinner with. And we're awaiting sentencing. So we're not in prison. In the holding jail, you're waiting to go to court to go to sentence. And you can see the pain in people's eyes. I mean, you're looking at people that, stabbed 2 family members, let's say, or shot his ex-wife's, husband. That's my friend. That's the guy I spend every day with. I can see the pain, the human psyche, right? How do you make it through that day knowing that you might go to the electric chair, you might go to jail for life, you're not going to see your family, your kids anymore, and your kids are going to look at you like you killed somebody, And I mean, so I ended up getting out of that case because of illegal search and seizure. They tried to burn the jail down one day. I'm in the bottom tier. The top tier, they had these 50-gallon drums of trash, and they started throwing fire, like lit paper or something. Most jails now don't have matches in it. There's no cigarettes in jail anymore. That's an old movie thing, and they're non-smoking. And I'm not saying they don't have the stuff in there, but it's not supposed to be. At that point, nobody cared. We have our hands through the bars like every one of those prison movies. I go, Jose, what's going on? He said, they're trying to start the jail on fire, so the guards will open up to let us out because it's so hot. They can't take the heat anymore. And I said, Jose, you do realize if they light the jail on fire, that we may all die here of smoke inhalation. They may not open. I ended up getting out. About a month later, I get a newspaper article sent to me. They burned the jail down. A couple things happened to me in my life that, are really painful. One was when I was in New Orleans after my dad died. My mother decided I was 13. I should have a little girl-boy party. She goes, don't worry. I'll get some girls and some guys over here. We have a pool. You'll have your first little get-together. At the corner of our street, there was a little park. It was 1970, I guess, and the whites had found out that there were some black people around the corner. A mob of men and women came over, and these couple of black kids in their 20s, all well-dressed. It looked like a picnic out of a movie. They beat them to death. And so you're 13 years old and you're watching this kind of violence. Flash forward, I'm in this jail, the Lawrence House of Detention, and my younger brother, the bail to get me and my co-driver, I had a co-defendant, out was $80,000. So it took us a couple weeks to get bail, to go to bail court, and then to raise the money. Of course, I had the money, but my brother had to fly around he was in Connecticut. He had to go to Florida and get it all together. He showed up. I told him to bring cash because I thought the jail wanted cash and they wouldn't take the cash. And it was a Friday night. I remember my brother being on one side of these bars that looked like they are from the 1800s, and me on the other. There was a woman in her 30s with 2 little girls, all dressed in the same matching sundresses. There's a guy on the floor, and I didn't realize it. I'm trying to get to my brother who's standing next to him on the outside of the bars on the visitor side, and the guy's curled up in the fetal position with foam coming out of his mouth, having a heart attack. And the little girls and the wife are yelling, begging the guards to do something. And the guards just look up and go, there's nothing we can do but give him an aspirin and call an ambulance. And I'm literally jumping over this dying man, seeing my brother and freedom on one side and the jail, and going to the guards, hey, he's got the cash, and hey, help this guy. Nothing I can do. I can't give the guy mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. A, I don't know how to do it. And B, the guards aren't going to let me touch the guy. But I am so callous, so crazed that I'm literally jumping over a dying man while his wife and 2 small kids watch. In 2 weeks in hell, it turns me into the devil like that. I just never, I still, think about that.
If you could go back and do something better in that situation, what would you do? Like, what could you have done?
Nothing. I couldn't give the guy mouth to mouth. I couldn't change the guards' minds. Nothing. I could have done nothing. Yeah. I could have not stepped over the guy.
Yeah, it's just like a disturbing memory. It's part of, sort of what you're saying is sort of who you became that you're not proud of when you go back to that memory of, oh, these are times in my life that I'm not proud of what this lifestyle was doing to me. That's a memory.
Exactly.
You were supposed to be able to make bail, and they were being difficult because they wanted the check, and your brother's right there like, I got the funds, bro, let's get you out. And so
and I'm talking to him on the phone. I'm on my way, days earlier.
Yeah. Did you end up staying?
Yeah, over the weekend, and that was the weekend they tried to burn the jail down. I'm like, my luck, right? I beat the case. My lawyer said you got busted with 1,400 pounds of weed. If you got caught with 1 ounce of coke, you'd have went to jail. And we were tried in the oldest working courthouse in America. It was in Salem, Massachusetts, where they tried the witches. My lawyer goes, listen, at noon, there's a tour group that comes through, so don't pay any attention. And I'm on the stand testifying that I did put the marijuana. I had to tell the truth. I put the marijuana in the truck, and there's a tour going through, and I'm like, wait, here's the funny thing. They market it as the oldest working courthouse in America, where the Salem witches were tried. It's not where the witches are tried. That courthouse burned down. They built another one down the street, and they just tell everybody that. So I had a girlfriend. We had a baby. My daughter was 1.5 years old. We always loved each other. It's just a volatile relationship. We got married, and my daughter was on our honeymoon. We came home, and I had to go back to work. I just spent $40,000 or $50,000 for a wedding, $10,000 for a honeymoon. I actually sold my car just by coincidence before we left. When I came back, I told my then now wife, I've got to go back to work. I got to move some drugs. And she begged me. She goes, please don't go. We have a baby. We're married. I remember her saying, I'll eat white bread and bologna sandwiches. You'll get a job. I'll get a job. Now remember, she was a drug smuggler, drug dealer, drug runner's girlfriend. So she was used to flying around in planes, go out in limos, go to concerts, So she was used to it. But she came from simple beginnings, and she was begging me not to go. And remember, no girl gets married thinking, I want a white picket fence, not a convict. I go out, and we had a special truck built with hidden secret compartments. My house had so many secret compartments that I had one that I couldn't get. I had hidden stash places built into my house so that one time I got home invaded and armed robbed. They put me on the ground, and I gave them 10,000 cash. They moved artwork that was probably worth 10 grand to steal an empty suitcase. And they go, where's the money? I go, well, there's 10 grand right there. They took that and left. I had 2 kilos hidden in a secret compartment worth about 60,000. So the artwork was worth more than the money almost. So I lived that lifestyle. You think after getting busted, and getting married and having a daughter and being robbed and watching my friends die, and I should quit. But no, I have Terry's still my partner in Ohio. So I went to Texas. I got a small load of weed, and I take it up to Ohio. It turns out Terry had gotten busted and turned me in, along with another friend of ours. Okay. So when I got there, I went in, and I was arrested. I was the kingpin, right? Unfortunately, in Ohio, like 17 people turned me in because everybody knew Kenny Bear from Florida was Terry's partner. Terry actually reached out to me, found me on a podcast and my website, and after 32 years, reached out, and I'm gonna fly up, visit him, and he goes, come up and see me. Everything's on me. I'm buying lunch. I go, I hope you're buying lunch.
Damn straight, Terry.
Yeah. But here's the thing. When Terry got busted, this is what they did. They said, here's what we're going to do. Since the pot's on your father's property, on your joint property, we're going to charge you, take your mother and father and put them in jail. We're going to put your wife and you in jail. We're going to take all the property and seize it, and your 4 kids are going to be orphans. You got 30 seconds. Are you going to talk, or are you going to go to jail? They charged him with RICO, or racketeering, which is a 25-year charge. So when they busted me, they had done it at a hotel. We never worked at a hotel before. Terry goes, meet me at a hotel. I go, why a hotel? He goes, I go, you got a house. He goes, well, the kids are getting older and smarter. And he had said that before. So I said, okay. So the door kicked in. Terry and I were, he came to see me at the hotel. He was wearing a raincoat. I go, why is he wearing a raincoat? It's not raining out. Well, he was wired underneath all the, they had him the transmitter and all that. He lit up a roach. And the next thing when he lit up the roach, I guess was the key to kick in the door. And immediately I knew he had set me up, and I didn't know all the backstory until, years later. But so the prosecutor comes to me and I'm handcuffed in the room. He goes, you're in big trouble, son. You better talk and talk right now. And I looked at him. I said, I got nothing to say. We were trained as young drug dealers. Remember, I grew up as a drug dealer my whole life. I'm 30 something. I started at 13. You never say a word. I mean, the older guys would tell us, like Sandy and Bob, Silver Bullet and Sandy would go, if you ever get caught, you keep your mouth shut. You're going to make a deal. You're going to hire lawyers. You're going to do whatever you're going to do. But if you talk, you have you're done. You don't even hire a lawyer because you already confessed. They put me in jail, they called me out of my cell, and I have no idea. As far as I know, they busted me with under 100 pounds, which is the smallest load I had ever done. I figured, how much can they give me? 2 or 3 years? It's a state charge. I'll do 18 months, 24 months, whatever. And, we'll figure it out. Karen and the baby we'll figure out a way to take care of everybody and I'll be back. Well, I get the charge. And I remember they called me out of my cell, and I always tell this story. The guy's dressed like wearing beige. I'm like, that's funny. Everybody in the jail wears like green or blue, And the guy goes, are you Ken Bear? And I'm thinking, who else can I be? You just pulled me out of a cell. It's not like somebody else is in there, other than my cellmate. And I go into more detail on all these stories in the book, obviously. And they hand me my indictment papers. The guard and I were kind of friendly. Bill and I would talk a lot. Some of the other prisoners say, what are you, a snitch? What are you talking to Bill for? I go, you guys are idiots. Sorry, you're dysfunctional. You're an ADHD, dysfunctional OC. I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to Bill. Bill said, are you going to be all right, kid? I said, yeah. Why? He goes, we're putting you on suicide watch tonight. And I go, what? What for? And he goes, you're looking at 55 years, kid. And I was like, oh my God. I looked at the papers and I couldn't read them. I couldn't see at that point. And I just looked at him. I said, no need. I'll be all right. And I went back to my cell to read the papers. Now, one of the reasons was I obviously, if he said you're looking at 15 years or 25 years, but 55, I thought to myself, wow, there's got to be something wrong here.
What goes through your mind? Somebody says, that's it. You're gonna die in here. What's the first thing? Where are you?
Blank, just dizzy,
Shocked?
dizzy, shocked,
Sick?
Blank, just dizzy and shocked.
Your family? Do you see your family? Do you see...
No, at that point, I swear to God, I was like just trying to breathe. So I read the charges and I see it's racketeering, which I know has, a minimum mandatory of 25 years federally. State is slightly different, but 25 years is the charge. And, eventually I made bond and the cops pulled me, aside. The arresting head of Lorain County Drug Task Force, Dennis Kavanaugh, pulled me aside and said, Kenny, I'm going to explain to you what's going on here. I said, I thought I made bond. I was walking out the door. They pulled me back in. I keep getting pulled back as I think I'm getting out. And he goes, we want Kelly. And Kelly was my ex-partner at a guy I grew up with. He's on, the cops want him and they're going to put all the 25 on you if you don't testify or give us Kelly. And they already had Kelly arrested in jail. And I said, look, I don't know anything about what Kelly and Terry were doing. They were doing it behind my back. If I'd have known that Kelly was up here running drugs to Terry in Ohio behind my back, I wouldn't have come up here with my load, because I know, I want to be in control of the situation. I'm not in control of what they're doing. And that's why I got busted, because Kelly had brought weed up and he just flooded the market. He just fucked the place, pardon me. And if Kelly hadn't shown up, so-and-so wouldn't have gotten busted. If so-and-so wouldn't have gotten busted, the chain of events. I mean, we're taught from like grade school, like you're on the playground. Hey, I got in trouble. Don't rat me out to the teacher. And the reality is in the big leagues, everybody does. Nobody's going to do 25 years if there's an out button. They just don't. If someone tells you have two choices, I'm either going to kill you or you're going to do 25 years, they're going to think about it. So I'm in jail. I'm looking at now 25 years and a prisoner pulls me aside who had been done 15 years. And he said, listen, you're keeping your mouth shut, but your co-defendant, my co-driver, if I'm not driving somebody, we're doing it as a team, he's already ratted you out. Kelly, that guy in the other pod, if he gets a chance, he's going to rat you out. He goes, it's not about who's not a rat. It's about who hasn't ratted yet. He goes, I did 15 years. His skin was loose and white. He had terrible prison tattoos. He goes, now often I had a 1.5-year-old daughter when I got busted 15 years ago for armed robbery in Louisiana. He was from Ohio. He goes, guess how many times I saw my daughter? Like, I don't know. He goes, once. He goes, you have a little daughter my daughter's age. You have to make a decision. If you want to change your life and never go back to crime and not be a drug dealer, then you go and make the best deal for you and your wife and your kids. But you got to change your life. Because if you decide to rat out your friend Kelly or anything else you do, and you go back to being a drug dealer and a criminal, then you're nothing more than a snitch and a rat. You deserve everything you're going to get. So I didn't commit to anything at that point, but I finally made bond and I got out and I got home, told everybody I'm getting out and, stay away from me. I've been busted. Tell everybody I've been busted. So I wasn't going to bust anybody in Ohio because Ohio, obviously they'd all turn me in. I didn't even know 17 people in Ohio. How 17 people knew me, I have no idea. I ended up going home and getting contacted by an old friend of mine that was a yacht broker and goes, how would you like to work for the DEA? And I'm like so adverse to this. I'm seeing my wife is feeding the baby. My daughter's 1.5 years old on the high chair. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? He goes, do you or do you not want to get out of trouble? Are you willing to work for the DEA? Yes or no? I go, yes. He goes, meet me we go to this little diner and he explains to me, I go, Dave, why are you helping me? And I knew he had gotten in trouble. He goes, well, it's kind of like if I bring you in and you bring in your people, I'll get credit for it. I go, wait a second. It's kind of like Amway. It's like multi-level marketing, like if you sell to, he said, yeah. So he introduced me to the DEA and it was out of Jacksonville. A guy in the book I call Jim Kane. I'm friends still with the DEA agent and the arresting officer in Ohio. If you read the book, there's a lot of in-depth connections, but the guy that was my DEA handler, I'm friends with him, his family to this day. The arresting officer in Ohio, I went back up to Ohio not too long ago and we hung out. I call him usually every Christmas to tell him I'm doing well and thanks for the second chance. But I went in like a 2-year thing of working for the federal government, and I never set up any of my friends that I grew up with. I just wasn't willing. But it was strange. Like even when I was in jail in Ohio, this one guy comes up to me and goes, look, I know you're looking at 25 years. I'm not getting out of here. I'm from Detroit. I have a guy in Detroit that owes me money. I want to get even with him. Here's his name and phone number. If you ever decide to work for the cops, give him this guy's information. When I got out, I said to the cops, hey, I don't know if this is any good. Sure enough, they busted him. But I'll also tell you, I have one friend of mine. They were groups, we're like the mob, it's 5 or 6 guys. One of them got busted and was looking at 10 years. The other 3 went and turned themselves in. So they each got 3 years because they said, we all work together. Why should one of them do 10 years and the other 3 of us get off scot-free? There is an understanding as a drug dealer that 2 things are going to happen. One, you're probably going to get robbed and you might get killed, but you're definitely going to get robbed, usually at least once, and you're probably going to get busted. You just don't believe it's going to happen to you. As I say, when you get in a race car and the guy next to you and you are both in race cars and you go into turn 1 flat out, you don't think either one of you is going to get hurt, but you don't think it's going to be you, it's going to be him if it's going to be one of you. How do guys jump out of airplanes? How do soldiers go into war? They insulate themselves psychologically. It's never going to happen to them. I'm better than that. I'm luckier than that. I'm smarter than that. So I ended up working for the DEA 2 years undercover, bringing in cases, and they would put me into cases. They would use us as actors because I was so knowledgeable. I knew the business for 20 plus years, so I knew how to talk the talk and walk the talk. Somebody would call me up and go, hey, I got something for you. It's strange. I want to explain something to everybody that's listening. It's about drugs and stopping drugs, but it's about asset seizures. My job was to seize sailboats, power boats, cash, houses. Drug dealers want to own, Porsches, gold, cash, houses. houses, and the government wants all that to help fund the war and justify their budgets and their salaries. Remember, nobody is happier about the drug war than the cops, the politicians, and the lawyers. All those stories are in the book. I mean, if you go to my website, there's pictures of me in Jamaica when I was a kid. There's pictures of some of the stuff I used with the DEA, and they showed me how to do it. They sent me to go out and buy like a little tape recorder and a microphone. And a friend of mine that I had never really run drugs with, he knew I was a smuggler and a drug runner, and we were both from Florida. He got out of jail, calls me up. He knows I got busted. He goes, "Hey, I got 125 pounds. Do you want to do the deal?" And I tell him, I said, "Buddy, I'm working for the cops." He goes, "Well, that's okay as long as you don't turn, anybody else in." Now what do I do? Is this guy working for the cops too? Is he checking me to see if I'm really gonna, So I just said, "Look, man, I mean, you put me in the middle." So I said, "Here." I sent him up to Jacksonville. I didn't even go along. I said, "Here, my friend in Jacksonville will sell you 125 pounds. He goes up there, gets busted. So what does he do? He turns in his friend in Jamaica. So now I fly down to Jamaica, and I'm trying to work for the DEA, trying to set up some Jamaican drug smuggler, and that almost got me killed. So luckily I got out of it. It didn't work quite the way the feds had hoped it would, but I didn't get killed. In Jamaica, they don't have guns, so they just cut you with machetes. They take you out to a field, and 2 or 3 guys with machetes just hack you to death. So I'll tell you a funny story. I mean, I think there I'm by myself, and I'm in this little hotel. There's a courtyard with a bar, and in Jamaica, Itol means non-alcoholic, all natural. Rastas don't drink alcohol. They don't eat pork. It's supposed to be an Itol means a natural life. You just smoke ganja. This guy starts yelling and screaming at me, and I'm yelling at him, trying to save the deal. Like, "Oh, you're full of shit. I'm not with the cops. I've been waiting here for days for you. Blah, blah, blah." So he leaves. I call my cell phone. I call back to the DEA Jacksonville office. My Jim Kane's not there, my handler. It's the head of the place answers, and he goes, "Hey," I go, "I think I can save this thing. Give me another day to try to bring this guy around." He goes, "There's no way that I'm risking you." I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh, I can talk this guy back into doing a trip with me," and luckily I didn't, because he might have said, "Sure, let's go out to the runway," and then had me hacked to death. He goes, "I want you to go and sit at the bar right now." I said, "All right." So I go out of my room, which is right across from the bar. I sit down. The DEA handler, the first day I met him, he told me his alias, Captain Bob. He goes, "And my name's Ken Bear." He goes, "Your new alias is Kilo Bravo. That's what you're known from now on, no matter what." So I go sit at this little bar, and I'm sitting at the edge of the bar, and there's these nice-looking black couple, Jamaican couple next to me, dressed nice, and they're drinking some fruit drinks. And the one looks at me and goes, "Go get your suitcase. You're leaving now." And I look at him. I go, "Who's this?" He goes, "Go get your suitcase." And I don't think, and he goes, "Kilo Bravo, go get your suitcase. We're leaving." And I looked at the guy, and I had this suitcase. I still have it today, that had secret compartments that could hold like 80,000 cash or some coke or pot, mostly cash. I didn't carry drugs like that in it. I still have it today. It has, it has no money left in it. I think there's where'd the money go? I keep looking inside. I grabbed the suitcase, and they put me on an airplane. I've never been from a hotel room through customs and sitting on an airplane faster, but I flew home, and my wife picked me up at the time with my little daughter, and I had done my job. I've had a lot of close calls with death. Strangely, there's a time I was on a sailboat. We were moving it to do a smuggling trip. We had a storm. The boat almost sank. Another time I was on a boat. I almost got hit in the head with like a 75-pound light. A couple of auto racing accidents. A few times guns were put to my head. I survived 2 open heart surgeries. My first open heart surgery, I had less than 2 weeks to live before they finally figured out what was wrong with me. Somebody once said to me, "Do you believe in God?" And I used to think as people got older, maybe they started believing in God more because they got closer to the end of their lives and they wanted to hang on to something. And I think what happens is you get to a point where you realize you're just not this good by yourself. There's a God in heaven. There's a higher power. My ex-wife left when my kids were 8 and 12. She got hooked on pharmaceutical drugs. My daughter is on top of her career. My son's moving into law enforcement, believe it or not, on the federal level. I'm married to probably one of the most amazing women in the world. For all my yin, her yang is she's an expert in early child development. She has the most honest, forthright. You couldn't find a more angelic woman to be married to this old broken con man or criminal or whatever I am. I don't believe all that happens by accident. We're just believers. All I know is that I'm not that good by myself, and I'm blessed to have a higher power to have me here today to tell this story to you.
That was Ken Bear, author of One Step Over the Line. For a limited time only, you can get access to Ken Bear's story by going to the website onestepovertheline.com and get your free copy by using code ChelseaJ100.